Day 1226 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,023,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,000 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 1 tank, 5 APVs, 21 artillery, and 101 unarmored vehicles. And with hundreds of thousands of motorbikes tipped to be on their way, purchased from China to be sent to the Russian army, these stats are about to get a whole lot more spicy and require new category breakdowns, but more on that shortly. Now to the map, where overnight Ukrainian forces executed a significant strike on a Russian ammunition depot in the occupied city of Kartitsk, located in the Donetsk region, causing a powerful detonation of a Russian ammunition warehouse, with secondary detonations continuing for hours later. The attack, reported to have been carried out by Ukrainian missiles and drones, signals a newfound consistency in Kyiv's use of its long-awaited homegrown arsenal of missiles and hybrid missile drone systems. The targeted facility was claimed to be an abandoned industrial warehouse, according to Russian officials. However, despite this designation, the sheer scale of the blast suggests the depot contained a substantial amount of munitions. Some Russians took to social media to claim it was a tactical nuclear strike, dazzled as they were by the sheer scale of the incident. Now, as for what this latest event also represents, is quite remarkable, as the Russian army is degenerating into old patterns of storing massive quantities of ammunition in single centralized stockpiles. Either that, or Russian commanders have a newfound case of overconfidence, storing such a large ammo cache just 60 kilometers or about 40 miles from the front lines, and just off the main highway between Donetsk and Luhansk. The ammo depot sat next to a rail junction where trains from Tagnarog crossed to Donetsk, and just north of a previous rail yard attack at Ilovaisk from a while back. This is just sheer military incompetence, and where the destruction of such depots not only hampers Russian military operations, but also serves as a psychological blow, demonstrating the reach, the access to military intelligence, and precision of Ukrainian forces. How could Russia allow this to happen just time after time? Then into Russia, where it was drone o'clock in Tambov and Lipetsk. Airports were grounded, and caught on camera in Lipetsk, the moment of locals hearing an incoming UAV, asking the question, is it a motorcycle, is it a bike? But moments later, coming to find what appeared to show the AFU send in a UAV that took on a mid-air interception. Next to Kursk, with unconfirmed reports from Russians on a deadly strike in Korenovo. More than 10 senior officers eliminated, including one major general, Mikhail Gudkov. But then there was similar news coming out of Crimea, with additional reports on the Russian Vice Admiral and commander of the Black Sea Fleet also classified as eliminated. Also notice the very first statement in this Telegram notification that could cause to confuse some, as it reads, "This is war." As if this Sherlock Holmes of a Russian Telegram author only just realized it. Then to a different type of loss for the Russian forces on the Sumy incursion front, as this group of 9 Russian soldiers from the heavily embattled 810th Marine Brigade have now become freshly minted POWs that say they got lost and traveled into the Sumy region. Forgive my skepticism here, but when marching into an across-border attack, someone doesn't qualify as getting lost in my books. And now they're both hopelessly begging and offering thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine for their compassion and for letting them live. Now to the main East front lines, where the Russian requirement for a strategic breakthrough has become very important, as per comments made by former leader of the Donbass-based Russian separatists, ultra-nationalist Igor Girkin, now a jailed Russian, who has remarked via a published statement by his wife on social media, Miroslava Reginskaya, quote, The time factor is of decisive importance. If we fail to achieve a decisive breakthrough on the front in the near future, we are facing a collapse of our rear and military defeat." End quote. These are sobering reflections that are less biting than criticism that landed him in prison, yet comments that are drawn from his years of experience in Donetsk during the so-called special military operation. Now, as for this part of the map, no substantial breakthroughs to be found, but Russian forces did expand a section of the grey zone in the northeast adjacent to Kupiansk and near Sinkivka. Then following that and down the map, Russian forces did gain some ground just beyond Constantinople and consolidated some isolated positions further in the direction of the river's edge, north of the main highway, around the small settlement named Zerka. Then as for nearby Dachne, across the river and into the Dnipro-Petrovsk Oblast, where Chief Intelligence Man of the Year Bottleneck refuted claims of Russian control on this new frontier, stating that the Russian presence was brief and repelled, but it is still subject to change, most would argue, in this ongoing fluid environment. Then looking around the map, where another foreign fighter for Russia has just been captured very near to the front lines and taken back as a POW in Ukraine. This time, another African man, no name, no ID, just another guy thrown into a war he probably didn't even fully understand, and in a situation whereby the Russian MOD has been doing this as much as they can, pulling in migrants with the promise of passports, pay, factory work, and a chance for a better life. But what these guys actually get is a rifle and a one-way trip to the contact point of the SMO. Also on the map, Russian soldiers sharing an image of a pile of misfired PG-7VR rounds. These are busted Russian anti-tank rockets that didn't go off as intended, as the Russian soldiers were stuck with a pile of duds instead of working munitions. Also on the map, Ukrainian border guards destroyed a Russian 122mm MLRS BM-21 Grad in the southern direction. Then also in newly uploaded compilation footage coming from a Ukrainian air assault brigade, 9 Jaberas were intercepted by Ukrainian drones on approach to their targets. The Russian Jabera UAVs are often used as decoy drones, but they are also used for reconnaissance and act as repeaters for the Shaheds. Plus, the occasional odd few have been known to have small warhead payloads. Next, headed up north in some map news updates, as Germany has initiated mass inspections of Russian tankers in the Baltic Sea. From the beginning of this month, suspected vessels must submit proof of insurance against oil pollution. This move targets Russian Shadow Fleet vessels, tightening security on maritime operations and potentially complicating its oil export efforts. The Shadow Fleet often includes older ships with unclear ownership and lack reputable insurance coverage, posing environmental and safety risks. And you just know, in the event of a Russian spill, they'll use every Kremlin excuse in the book to deny fault. So Germany's new checks on Russian tankers are a clear signal that the old loopholes are closing, warning to Russia's shadow fleets that the game is changing. Smooth sailing just got a whole lot harder in their old rusty tin cans. Then to some recent big news, as the US has paused shipments of critical munitions to Ukraine, including Patriot missiles, HIMARS rockets, and artillery shells, citing low stockpiles and prioritizing US military readiness, and for a suspension that includes some deliveries that were approved under the previous US Biden administration. The suspension was reportedly expressed as being made with minimal coordination within the Trump administration, catching US lawmakers and international allies off guard. Members of Congress have expressed frustration over the lack of communication regarding the aid suspension and are demanding better transparency on the decision. NATO officials and European diplomats have expressed unease over the US aid suspension, fearing it may undermine Ukraine's defense and embolden Russian aggression further. President Zelensky has actively addressed the suspension by emphasizing Ukraine's commitment to bolstering its domestic defense industry to ensure security through self-reliance. So this military aid suspension by the US administration administration is unfortunate, but was not unexpected, even though it comes right after the US-Ukraine mineral agreement signed not that long ago. So although it does come as a bit of a slap in the face to Ukraine, it does not prohibit Ukraine from purchasing weapons directly from the US, with President Zelensky who expressed readiness to purchase up to $50 billion worth of US air defense systems and other weaponry, becoming a move that signifies a geopolitical shift from reliance on aid to forming a long-term security partnership through direct purchases instead. Then onto a related topic, and as part of a hardware news segment, where Ukraine's growth in its homegrown defense segment of its multi-layered air defense network continues to show upgrades, with Ukrainian defense tech cluster Brave One, who has developed a specialized 5.56mm caliber round designed specifically to combat enemy FPV drones, as it fragments shortly after firing, creating a wider impact area as opposed to standard rounds. According to Ukrainian sources, the Ministry of Defense has already codified the ammunition and officially adopted it into service. The intent is that every soldier on the battlefield should carry at least one magazine loaded with this specialized anti-drone ammunition right at a time where Russia is expanding its kamikaze UAV activity targeting Ukraine. Then to some more domestic production hardware news, as Ukrainian engineers have developed a local counterpart to the American loitering munition, the Switchblade 600, with the Ukrainian company Reactive Drone that has created the Pop-Fly loitering munition, which is currently undergoing testing. The Pop-Fly will be able to operate in both strike and reconnaissance variants. It will carry a payload of 2.5 to 5 kilos and have a range of 50 to 100 kilometers, depending on the type of warhead used. Just like the Switchblade 600, the Pop-Fly will launch from a dedicated container, simplifying deployment and operation. So what we see here is Ukraine that has what can now be described as more than just a bustling tech sector and defense sector, as it's quietly transformed into a force that produces nearly 40% of its own weapons and military technology. It's a shift born out of sheer necessity. Survival demanded not just innovation, but self-reliance on a tremendous scale. And history shows military tech always pivots to business, where Ukraine's breakthroughs will follow. Post-war, this means Ukraine gets a jump in both tech and manufacturing, backed by one of the most cost-competitive labor markets in Europe, positioning itself to become one of the continent's standout tech hubs in the years ahead. Then to some Russian hardware news. As Russia's scrambling to boost its army's mobility, rushing to modernize training grounds with motorcycle tracks, and reportedly eyeing up to 200,000 Chinese-made bikes for its forces. Defense bosses have been spotted at revamped schools in Novosibirsk and Krasnodar, talking up the new tactics as they order motorcycles, ATVs, and buggies to help cadets train for Ukraine-style warfare, as they call it. Over 200 training centers now have updated tracks, and the Russian army is racing to formalize motorcycle tactics across the force. There's still a lot of chatter among Russian sources about how fast this can really happen. One Telegram channel claims the push started in late 2024, designed with the intention to speed up advances near Pokrovsk. The Russian military is looking to purchase 120,000 motorcycles from China this year, with a bigger goal of 200,000 motorcycles and 60,000 other light vehicles by next year. There's even talk of ex-Wagner instructors being hired to teach troops how to use their new rides. So it looks like tanks are out, bikes are in, where Russia's prepping for a Mad Max-style reboot on the battlefield, but this time with more ex-mercenary Wagner instructors that are very well known for their heavily attritional meat-wave tactics of the past. What could possibly go wrong? Peering into the future, 200,000 motorcycles per annum might sound like a big number, but even when you ignore the issues in the lack of armor, transportation capacity, and inhumane methodologies of kamikaze two-wheel army frontline assault attacks, it's practically guaranteed that before Russia even gets to that amount of motorbikes, Ukraine will have already produced almost 4 million homegrown FPV drones per annum, which is what its scale scaling up to now, thereby becoming a figure that outclasses this future volume of motorbikes by a staggeringly whopping factor of 20 to 1. Then headed to something quick, light, and visually a bit comical to round off the video today. Here we see Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade that slipped 450 meters into enemy territory with a ground robot undetected. Pulling off a slick move, they snatched a PKM machine gun from right under the enemy's nose and brought it back. What a tactical steal right there. So that has to be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!